The pink eviction notice fluttered in the breeze like a taunting slap from fate itself, taped haphazardly to Liam Carter's front door with scrappy Scotch tape, its Comic Sans font, and cheap gold HOA sticker, looking straight out of a kindergartner's craft bin, adding insult to injury. The real gut punch? It wasn't even addressed properly, just a cold, "To whom it may concern, you are hereby ordered to vacate this property in 72 hours. Liam blinked, reread the words, and froze in stunned silence, grocery bag dangling from his hand as his elderly neighbor's dog lifted a leg on his mailbox. This wasn't some prank gone wrong. It was a full-blown declaration of war from someone who had no idea who they were up against. That someone revealed herself as Karen Dillard, president of the Chestnut Glen Homeowners Association, marching up the path toward Liam like she owned the concrete, the trees, and the very air he breathed. Perched atop her head was a visor blaring Tennessee Life in dazzling rhinestones, oversized sunglasses shielding her eyes despite the grey, overcast sky. Her voice cut through the stillness like a siren. "There you are," she snapped, arms crossed. "You've been dodging our notices. That house isn't legally yours. You're just squatting there." Her tone dripped with the smug certainty of a villain mid-monologue. Liam, a 23-year-old civil engineering grad who'd moved back into his late grandfather's home 6 months ago after the old man's passing, stood his ground. The house was his, left to him, fair and square in a legally binding will, notarized, filed and signed with enough paperwork to make a county clerk weep. But Karen didn't care about fact. She craved control. He flashed a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I live here. You might want to check your database." Karen huffed. "The HOA board voted on a new policy. No single owners under 25. You don't qualify." Which city of the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you have any confrontation with the HOA. We will narrate your story on our channel. Neighborhood has standard. Liam blinked, letting the weight of that absurdity settle like fog. "Did you just say I'm too young to live in my own house? It's for the safety of the community," she snapped. "We've had break-ins, teenagers' parties. You don't even have kids' families, need homes. You're just wasting space." It was so cartoonishly offensive. Liam had to glance around to see if hidden cameras were catching this for a prank show, but no, this was Karen in full HOA president glory. Liam had heard whispers from neighbors about her antics, slapping fines on people for having flower pots an inch too far from the walkway, calling code enforcement over Christmas lights. In November, demanding permission slips for driveway chalk art, but he hadn't expected to become her next crusade. "You're trespassing," she added, pointing to the porch he was currently standing on. "I can and will have you removed, lady. I pay the property. Taxes mow the lawn, and my name is literally on the title that won't hold up. Under the new amendments, we revised the charter." "You can't revise state law," Liam said, now more amused than angry. "The home was deed to me. You can't undo a legal inheritance." "Because you feel like it." Karen tilted her head. "Well, see about that. Enjoy your last few days here. You might want to start packing with that." She spun on her pristine white sneakers and marched away muttering about standards and riffraff and something about unauthorized tomato plant. Liam stood there for a beat, then calmly reached into his bag and pulled out a can of cold soda. He popped the tab, took a sip, and looked at the eviction notice still flapping in the breeze. The old Liam might have panicked, but this Liam had learned from watching his grandfather battle bureaucracy, repair his own roof in a hurricane and charm city clerks out of parking tickets. And more importantly, this Liam was not just any 23-year-old with a house. He was the son of Mayor James Carter, a man who had built his political career on exactly the kind of community outrage Karen was now serving hot on a silver platter. But he didn't want to pull rank, not yet. He wanted to see how far Karen was willing to push her fake authority before she tripped over her own delusions. He also knew that the more rope you give someone like Karen, the more spectacularly they hang themselves. Over the next few days, the harassment escalated. A citation appeared in his mailbox for having an off-white garage door. His mailbox, perfectly standard, was suddenly declared too rural for the suburban aesthetic. He received a fine for having his trash cans out 10 minutes early, even though the truck came by at 6 HOA. Em and Liam had to be at work. By 5, it was like Karen had made it her full-time mission to annoy him into submission. He decided to start documenting everything he installed, a set of discreet but high-resolution security cameras positioned to record his porch, driveway, mailbox, and front yard. The footage wasn't just for safety, it was for insurance. Liam knew how HOAs operated. If you couldn't prove your case, they'd bury you under technicalities. Then came the secret meeting notice. A neighbor, a kind woman in her 60s named Ruth, slid him a note under his door. Karen's holding a closed board meeting to revoke your membership status, she whispered through the door. Don't let her do it. She's done this to 2 other owners who were renting out their homes, forced them to sell. Thanks, Ruth. I've got it handled. She looked skeptical, but Liam wasn't bluffing that evening. He pulled up the HOA's public bylaws and cross-referenced them with city statute. He discovered that Karen had been operating in a grey zone, modifying internal rules without public vote or legal quorum. Worse, the HOA had failed to file their last 2 compliance documents with the city's Housing Oversight Board. He smiled to himself. That was going to matter. He sent an email to the city clerk's office, CCing the public housing director and the mayor's administrative liaison, not because he wanted to weaponize his father, but because it was time someone took a closer look at the circus masquerading. As an HOA, he also dug up the audio from the last board meeting, which, thanks to state transparency laws, had to be publicly available. It included Karen explicitly saying, "He's just a kid, we can push him out before anyone notices." By the end of the week, Liam had a digital folder thicker than a court brief. He called his father not as the mayor, but as Dad, and laid out the whole story. "You want me to step in?" His father asked, voice calm but firm. "Not yet," Liam said. "Let her keep playing queen. I want the truth to come out in public, not just through a press release. People need to see her trip over her own rules. You always were your grandfather's grandson." His father chuckled. "Just don't let her push too far. Call it."
Me. If she gets physical, I've got cameras and backup. What kind of backup? The kind with a badge and a news van on speed dial. Liam hung up, glanced at his security monitor, and saw Karen standing at the edge of his property line again, measuring the
grass with what appeared to be a ruler. He cracked open another soda, leaned back in his chair, and smiled. Let the games begin. The next morning, Liam was greeted by a fresh, fine, 4-back doll 150. The offence listed was unauthorized shade structure, referring to the small pergola his grandfather had installed in 1999, fully permitted, and grandfathered into code. Liam chuckled. As he read the citation, it was almost admirable how far Karen would reach just to fabricate violations. But what truly amused him was the timing. It had been less than 12 hours since she'd told him to start packing, and she was already attempting. Financial pressure. The real kicker was that the so-called violation notice had been hand-delivered not by mail or HOA email, but slipped under his door with a sticky note that said, "You can't outsmart the system." Liam walked out to check on the pergola and found a fluorescent orange sticker slapped on one of the wooden posts. It read, "Marked for removal." He took a photo of it with his phone and then another of Karen's SUV parked crookedly on the community trail path, ironically blocking emergency vehicle access. His phone had a folder now titled HOA Circus. Every image, every notice, every time-stamped video clip went into it. He wasn't just building a case, he was building a timeline, a narrative, a comprehensive collection of Karen's obsession, and she was practically feeding him new evidence by the hour. Later that afternoon, a neighbor named Marcus stopped by. He was in his 40s, father of two, and had always been cordial but distant until now. He stood at the property line holding a manila envelope and looked both ways, like he was about to commit treason. He handed the envelope to Liam and whispered, "Don't tell anyone I gave this to you. It's the agenda from the last closed door HOA session. Karen doesn't let us keep our own copies, but I took a photo before she snatched it back. Look at bullet point number 3. Liam opened the envelope and found a blurry photo of a typed document with highlighted sections. Bullet point 3 read, "Discuss removal process for unauthorized young resident. Consider code revisions or emergency vote." Liam stared at it, then looked back at Marcus. "She's really trying to engineer an eviction by any means." Marcus nodded. "She's always hated younger people in the neighborhood. She calls it a retirement vision. But really, it's just control. You're the first one who hasn't just rolled over." That evening, Liam heard a knock at his door. When he opened it, he was met by a city code enforcement officer named Cheryl. She looked uncomfortable, clipboard in hand. "Hi, Mr. Carter. I'm here to follow up on a reported non-compliant structure." "Let me guess." "The pergola?" Liam asked, stepping aside to let her see it. She gave a small sigh. "Yes, honestly, this isn't even something we'd usually investigate, but we've gotten 6 calls about it this week from the same number, and I'm required to respond." Liam walked with her to the pergola and pulled out his phone. It was built in 1999, fully permitted. "My grandfather kept everything. Here's the scan permit and the inspection sign-off. I've also got it in print if you need it." Cheryl scanned the permit and smiled. "This is more documentation than most contractors carry. I'll close the case, but off the record, whoever keeps reporting this stuff really doesn't like you off the record," Liam said. "She's about to dislike me even more the next morning." Liam drove to City Hall and visited the Office of Records and Licensing. Within 20 minutes, he'd pulled the HOA's annual compliance filings, or lack thereof, Chestnut Glen. HOA hadn't filed a financial disclosure in 2 years that alone could trigger a temporary freeze on their enforcement privileges under the municipal charter. What made it worse was that their architectural committee had been ruling on property changes without a legally authorized vote since their quorum expired 3 months ago. It was as if Karen had just decided the rules didn't apply to her anymore. As Liam stood in line to request certified copies, he noticed a familiar face. A few windows down, it was Marlene, his father's administrative assistant. She gave him a knowing look and walked over during her break. "You doing some digging?" Liam nodded. "Just getting the full picture." She leaned in slightly and whispered words already reached the mayor's office. "You want us to step in?" "Not yet," Liam said. "Let's see what happens when the board sees this." First, on the drive home, Liam passed by the community garden and noticed Karen speaking to a couple of residents. She spotted his truck and immediately turned her back. He parked and watched as she gestured wildly at the communal flower beds, her voice loud even over the buzz of a nearby lawnmower. She was in campaign mode, trying to convince the other homeowners that Liam was a dangerous presence. Liam shook his head. It was like watching a bad reality show unfold in real time. By the time he got home, there was a new sign on his lawn, This property under HOA review, he laughed aloud. Karen was creating fake categories, now review, for what breathing to. Confidently, he took a photo and added it to the folder the next day. Things took a sharp turn. His water pressure dropped to a trickle, and the city utility app flagged a maintenance request that hadn't come from him when he called the water department. They confirmed that a request for meter disconnection and inspection had been submitted under his name by someone using a Chestnut Glen HOA email address. That was enough. Liam forwarded the email thread to the city's fraud department and filed an official report. Then, just for good measure, he called a local reporter who specialized in suburban government abuse stories and shared a few highlights from his growing case folder. Later that night, Karen showed up again, this time with 2 board members in tow. She stood at the curb with a clipboard and read from it like she was reciting scripture. Due to your non-compliance and ongoing refusal to honor community standards, we are issuing a community citation and giving you final notice to vacate. Liam didn't even respond. He just walked to the edge of his lawn, held up his phone, and said, "Smile for the record."
Karen froze. One of the board members nudged her. "Karen, you sure this is legal? I mean, he's got documents. It doesn't matter." She snapped. "He's undermining order." Liam spoke calmly. "Actually, what I'm doing is exposing a mismanaged HOA board operating
Without quorum and a president violating municipal codes. I've already filed a full report, and just for fun, the city has a copy of this little performance. Now the color drained from Karen's face. She stammered something about decorum and stormed. Off heels, clacking against the pavement, Liam turned to go back inside, but paused and looked back. "By the way, Karen," he called out, "did you know that failure to file HOA compliance documents can result in fines up to $10,000 per violation? That's per resident complaint." Karen didn't answer, but for the first time she didn't talk back either, and that silence was the sweetest sound of all. Inside, Liam sat down, opened his laptop, and began drafting an open letter to the HOA community, not as the mayor's son, just as a resident one who had had enough. He titled the file, "Enough is Enough." And it was only the beginning. After 3 days after Karen's dramatic sidewalk ultimatum, Liam received something unexpected in the mail, a certified envelope with no return address, and a suspiciously generic law firm name typed on the front, Jefferson. Anfield's legal associate. He opened it carefully and unfolded a single sheet of paper that claimed to be a cease and desist letter. The paper was poorly formatted, the firm name didn't show up in any legal registry, and the email contact was a Gmail. Address. The accusations inside were laughable. It accused Liam of defamation, trespassing, and intentional obstruction of community peace, citing things like improper vehicle noises and eye contact deemed intimidating by neighbors. Liam let out a full laugh. It wasn't just a scare tactic, it was amateur hour in legal theater. He held it up to the camera on his porch to document it, then walked back inside, shaking his head. But something about it struck a nerve. Karen was ramping up. She wasn't just annoyed anymore, she was afraid. The fake legal threats proved it. She knew her power was slipping, and she was grasping at straws to try to maintain her crumbling kingdom. Liam, however, wasn't just prepared, he was ready to take control of the narrative. He opened his laptop and added the cease and desist letter to the ever-growing digital archive. Then he made a plan. It was time to show the rest of the neighborhood exactly who Karen really was. He began with a backyard barbecue. The idea wasn't revenge, it was transparency. He called it a meet your neighbor night, posted polite, non-inflammatory invitations on community bulletin boards, and even emailed the invite to the HOA's official list. He included a note saying, "Let's talk, let's share, let's make our community stronger together." The RSVP list grew faster than expected. People were tired of Karen's rules, her fines, her drone surveillance. They were ready for a change, but had been too afraid to speak up. Liam's party became their spark that Saturday. Liam's yard transformed lights strung between trees, music, playing softly, folding chairs circling a fire pit, and tables full of food brought by residents who hadn't attended a neighborhood event in years, retirees, new parents, young couples, all mingling. Liam didn't speak about Karen directly. He didn't have to. People were sharing their stories without prompting. One woman, Alice, tearfully recalled being fined for painting her front door blue without permission. A retired schoolteacher admitted he'd stopped flying the American flag because Karen had told him it was too political. As the fire crackled and stories flowed, something remarkable happened. Neighbors began organizing. One of them, a man named Darrell, stood up and said, "Why don't we request the minutes from the last 5 board meetings? We are entitled to them." Another, a software developer named May, offered to build a shared Google Drive to collect everyone's complaint letters and fines. A younger woman named Becca said she had a friend in local media who might be interested in what was happening. By the end of the night, the community wasn't just venting, they were mobilizing. Liam had lit a quiet, steady fire under Karen's seat, and it was starting to glow red hot. The next morning, Karen struck back. A brand new violation notice was taped to Liam's mailbox. This one accused him of hosting an unsanctioned event with amplified noise and attached a photo clearly taken by drone of the backyard barbecue. Liam stared at it, jaw clenched. That meant Karen had flown her drone over private property again, and this time during an event with children present. That detail mattered. He opened his laptop and reviewed the footage. Sure enough, the drone was visible, circling overhead, dipping close enough to the crowd to be intrusive. Liam clipped the video, time-stamped it, and attached it to a new complaint, this time addressed to the FAA. Unauthorized drone surveillance over residential events violated multiple privacy and airspace regulations. He didn't stop there. He uploaded a version of the footage to a private neighborhood link with the title, "Is this your HOA president?" The link circulated quickly by evening. Liam was receiving calls from neighbors who were furious. One elderly couple said they'd caught the drone peeking through their upstairs window earlier that month. A teen said it followed him to the community pool and hovered until he left. What was once suspicion turned to collective outrage. People were no longer scared, they were angry. Then came the tipping point. Liam received a USB drive from Ruth. "You didn't get this from me," she said firmly, then walked away without another word. Inside the drive was something he hadn't expected. Audio recordings from HOA meetings, real uncut, unedited files. Liam plugged it in, hit play, and listened. What he heard made his blood run cold. It was Karen laughing, mocking residents by name, bragging about how she manipulated the board votes by rewarding ballots and refusing to notify members of quorum failures. She even admitted to deleting objection letters from residents by claiming they never arrived. And then came the line that changed everything. "We need to make it hard for Liam," she said. "People like him think they can just inherit a house and own the block. We'll bury him in paperwork until he sells." Liam closed his eyes, jaw tight. That was it. That was the moment. This wasn't about code enforcement. This was targeted harassment. It was a premeditated campaign. And now it was provable. He emailed the file to 2 people. First, to a local investigative journalist named Sandra, who had covered similar stories in the past. Second, to the city council liaison. And then, just for good measure, he included a copy to a state housing oversight board. He didn't attach a message. The audio spoke for itself that night. Liam stepped outside and noticed something strange. Karen's SUV was parked across the streetlights off. He couldn't tell if she was inside, but it was almost 1000 p.m. and her usual curfew. Paranoia meant she never stayed out that late. He stood on his porch, arms folded, watching the porch. Camera zoomed slightly, confirming that someone was indeed in the front seat. He waved the headlights, flicked on, then off. Then the engine roared, and the SUV sped off without stopping. She was watching. She knew something was changing. 2 days later, the first article dropped. Local blog headlines read, "HOA Tyranny in Chestnut. Glen residents claim harassment, fake violations, and drone spying." The story blew up. Locally, comments poured in. Former residents chimed in from other states, sharing their own Karen horror stories. The journalist had done her homework and included excerpts from the leaked recordings. She didn't name Liam directly, but everyone in the neighborhood knew he was the quiet homeowner who dared to push back. Karen panicked. She sent out an emergency newsletter claiming the recordings were faked, the barbecue was illegal, and that the young squatter was manipulating the media. But now she was yelling into a storm. She no longer controlled her words. Didn't land the way they used to. Her threats were met with skepticism, not fear. The community wasn't just awake, they were organizing without her. Later that week, Liam stood before a crowd of 30 residents gathered on his front lawn. No microphones, no banners, no politics. Just a homeowner, speaking from the heart. He thanked them for their courage, for coming forward, for saying, "Enough is enough." And then in one quiet, powerful sentence, he said, "She thought I was just some kid who didn't know how things worked. But she forgot something." Everyone leaned in. "I'm my father's son." That line echoed like thunder, and the storm Karen tried to start was now sweeping back toward her, bigger and louder than she could ever imagine. The fallout from the article came quicker than even Liam anticipated. 2 days after it dropped, a Black City SUV pulled up to Chestnut Glen's community office, a small, stucco building that Karen had transformed into her personal thief, complete with a marble plaque outside that read Chestnut Glen. Administrative Center, inside, Karen sat with her signature pink mug labeled President for Life and a stack of fabricated violation reports on her desk. She looked up just in time to see 2 people in formal attire enter the building. One was from the City Housing Department, the other from Municipal Compliance Enforcement. They didn't knock, they walked straight in, like they owned the place. Karen stood up, caught off guard, but trying to look unbothered. "Can I help you?" The taller of the 2, a woman with a city badge on her blazer, handed Karen an envelope. Inside was an official audit notice the city had received. Multiple complaints accompanied by substantial documentation alleging serious violations in Chestnut Glen's HOA practices, including unlawful surveillance, misuse of authority, falsified fines, and failure to file required financial disclosures. Karen skimmed the document and laughed nervously. "This is ridiculous. These are fabricated, probably from that child, Liam or whatever his name is." The man next to her replied evenly, "Actually, we've confirmed several of the complaints independently, including the fact that your HOA has not held a legally recognized vote in over 7 months. That alone is grounds for administrative review. We'll be reviewing all your records starting today." Karen sputtered, trying to stall, but the city officials were already pulling out laptops and scanning the shelves of fake fines and edited minute. Her castle was being raided. The power she wielded through intimidation and manipulation was now being held under a legal microscope, and every corner of her little empire was cracking. Meanwhile, Liam wasn't even home. He was at City Hall, sipping bad coffee and handing off a neatly organized binder labeled Chestnut. Glen Evidence Index. Inside were receipts, photos, audio, clips and transcripts. It had taken weeks of effort, but the final product was undeniable. He wasn't just filing complaints anymore, he was documenting a history of abuse that the city couldn't ignore. Across town, word had spread faster than wildfire. Residents of other neighborhoods with HOAs began posting online about similar experiences. Liam's story triggered a cascade of community introspection. People realized they had rights, they hadn't exercised, and that fear of retaliation wasn't enough to silence truth. One neighborhood even invited Liam to speak at a community event, calling him a symbol of the modern homeowner. He declined politely, but offered his documentation template for anyone who wanted to challenge their HOA legally back. In Chestnut Glen, the HOA board was imploding. 2 of the members had resigned already, citing Karen's misconduct, and the legal pressure mounting around them. The remaining members were scrambling, meeting in secret, whispering over phone calls and trying to decide whether to remove Karen before the entire board was dissolved. But Karen refused to step down. She doubled down instead, sending out a mass email claiming Liam was trying to destroy the community from within and calling for a special emergency meeting to restore order. When residents showed up for the meeting, they found police officers stationed outside the community office, not to protect Karen, but to ensure that no further unauthorized documents were shredded inside city. Officials were still combing through files, and the HOA meeting was promptly cancelled. Karen tried to pivot, saying it was a private gathering, but one officer stepped forward and replied, "Not anymore." Liam stayed silent through most of this. He didn't gloat, he didn't brag. Instead, he did something unexpected. He reached out to the other board members who hadn't resigned and offered them an olive branch. He invited them to his home, not to argue, but to talk. 3 of them showed up visibly tense. Liam sat them down in his living room, handed them lemonade, and laid it out plain and simple. "I don't want your positions, I don't want power, I want fairness. What Karen did wasn't just wrong, it was illegal, and you can either help fix it or go down with it." They listened for the first time they saw him, not as the defiant 23-year-old Karen had painted him to be, but as someone far more dangerous to the old order, a reasonable person with evidence.
Strategy and nothing to lose. One of them, a mild-mannered man named Doug, finally said, "I think it's time we removed her officially."
The next day, a motion was filed to vote on Karen's removal as HOA president. Karen, sensing the end, called an emergency press conference on the front steps of the community office. The only people who showed up were 2 local journalists, one resident with a protest sign that said, "Let us plant tomatoes," and a stray dog that wandered into the frame and peed on the podium. Her speech was frantic, erratic. She ranted about outsider interference, fake news, and age discrimination. In reverse, she shouted that Liam was a government plant sent to destroy the suburban dream. The clip went viral online, not for its substance, but because halfway through her rant, the dog started barking over her voice, and someone dubbed dramatic violin music over the footage. Karen's final meltdown came 2 nights later. She broke into Liam's backyard, wearing all black like a cartoon cat burglar, and tried to snip the wires on his security cameras. What she didn't realize was that the entire system had already been backed up to cloud storage. Liam watched the footage live from inside his house, sipping tea. He waited until she tripped over a sprinkler head and face planted into a rosebush before calling the police when they arrived. She tried to claim she was performing an HOA inspection. The officers looked at the freshly mangled roses, the wire cutters in her hand, and the video footage, then placed her in cuffs. Liam stepped onto the porch, just as they were guiding her into the cruiser. "This
is abuse," she screamed. "He's sabotaging this whole neighborhood."
One officer glanced at Liam. "You want to press charges?" Liam thought for a moment. Not yet. Let her explain this to the city investigator first. As the cruiser pulled away, the street was silent. Neighbors had peeked out from porches, blinds, and behind curtains. Word would travel fast, but Liam wasn't done. He walked inside and opened his laptop again. There was one final move. Left one he'd been saving. He opened a scanned copy of a property deed, one that showed his grandfather's original purchase agreement for the land now known as Chestnut Glen, and at the bottom in handwritten legal script was a clause that hadn't been enacted in decades: the right of minority ownership to petition for structural governance review. In simpler terms, it meant Liam could call for an internal vote on completely rewriting the HOA charter, and, due to the land inheritance, his vote carried more weight than any single residence he clicked. Send. The vote would happen in a week, and if it passed, Karen wouldn't just be gone, her entire regime would be wiped from the book that night. Liam stepped into his backyard, looked around at the roses she trampled, and smiled. It was poetic in a way she tried to uproot his life. And now she was the one, being removed at the roots. The final week leading up to the vote felt like the entire neighborhood had collectively stopped holding its breath. The signs were everywhere. People who used to glance nervously at Karen's house now strolled past it. Without looking twice, the HOA bulletin board, once flooded with Karen-approved newsletters and violation warnings, now held polite notices from interim board members outlining the voting process, legal clarifications, and community meeting times. Liam had become a quiet symbol in the community, not through loud declarations or power moves, but through consistency documentation and the kind of calm resolve that left no room for doubt. Karen, however, didn't take her downfall with grace. Even under city investigation, even after being caught tampering with Liam's security cameras, she refused to step down. She released another mass email calling the upcoming vote illegitimate, claiming it was orchestrated by political operatives hiding behind a boy with a trust fund and a chip on his shoulder. Liam read it while sipping coffee on his porch, amused by how her insults kept escalating while her credibility kept evaporating. What Karen didn't know, because she never bothered to look beyond her own reflection, was that Liam hadn't touched his inheritance. He still drove his grandfather's beat-up pickup, still bought groceries on sale, and still fixed his own leaky sink last month with a wrench and a YouTube video she imagined. Him as a spoiled kid, because the truth that he was a quiet, methodical adult with more patience than pride made him harder to attack. Her perception was her downfall. The day of the vote arrived with perfect weather, which felt poetic. Sunlight filtered through the trees, casting golden lines across the sidewalk as neighbors walked to the community center. Ballots in hand, Liam stood near the entrance, not campaigning, not shaking hands, just smiling. As people passed, some stopped to say, "Thank you." Others gave him quiet nods. There was a collective understanding. Now he hadn't just stood up to Karen, he'd held up a mirror to the entire system, and the residents had seen themselves for the first time in years. The vote took place inside the main room of the community center. Folding tables lined the walls, manned by temporary volunteers. Everyone was checked off the registry, given a ballot, and guided to the booth. The proposal was clear: remove Karen Dillard from her role as HOA president, dissolve her board appointments, and approve a full rewrite of the Chestnut Glen governance charter. It wasn't just about Karen anymore, it was about reimagining how power worked in their neighborhood. By noon, nearly every eligible homeowner had voted. The results wouldn't be announced until that evening, giving the interim board time to verify and count each submission. Liam returned home, not to wait nervously, but to clean up the flower beds in his backyard, The roses Karen had trampled were already starting to grow back. He knelt in the dirt, pulling weeds and humming to himself. Some neighbors would have been pacing, but Liam found peace in motion. He wasn't afraid of the result. He trusted the people to see what they needed to see at 6 sharp. The results were posted on the community bulletin board and emailed to all residents. The vote had passed overwhelmingly. Karen was removed from her position with 87% support. The board was disbanded, and the rewrite of the charter was scheduled to begin the following month with open public input. The moment the email hit inboxes, Liam's phone lit up. Messages poured in. Neighbors sent congratulations, emojis, gifts of fireworks, and in one case, a picture of someone popping champagne on their porch with the caption, "Karen Who." But Liam didn't celebrate. Right away, he stepped outside, walked down the street, and stood quietly on the corner where Karen's infamous pink SUV was usually parked. It wasn't there anymore. She had left no goodbye, no final tantrum, just silence, the way a storm leaves a sky once it's done, tearing everything down. Some might have expected a dramatic exit, but in the end, her power didn't fade with noise. It evaporated. The moment no one was afraid of her anymore. Later that night, Liam finally hosted a gathering, not a protest, not a barbecue, just a backyard bonfire with no speech, no agenda. People brought esmeralda, cider, lawn chairs. Kids ran around with flashlights, pretending to chase ghosts. One man brought his guitar. It was a night of exhaling. A night that felt like what neighborhoods used to be before petty politics and power trips turned everything into turf wars. Someone handed Liam a plate of cookies and joked, "This better not violate any cookie quota bylaws." He laughed and held it up like a trophy. "I'll file the proper sugar documentation tomorrow." The crowd laughed. The mood was light, real, and unforced for the first time. In a long time, people weren't watching their back. They were just looking at each other. About halfway through the night, Liam's dad showed up. He didn't make a scene, didn't walk in with his title or a parade of officials, just a father in jeans and a flannel shirt holding a cooler. And a smile. He sat beside his son, handed him a drink and said, "Proud of you, not just for winning, for not becoming her in the process." Liam nodded. "I thought about it would have been easier to fight dirty, but she did that and look where it got her." His father looked around at the relaxed faces, the gentle buzz of voices, the firelight flickering in the dark. "Looks like your grandfather would have been proud too." The bonfire burned long into the night. Eventually, people started drifting home. Liam helped clean up, gathering empty cups and stray marshmallow stick. As he stood at the edge of his yard, he looked up at the house that had once been his grandfather's, the house Karen had tried to take from him, and thought of everything it had, withstood bad weather time pressure and power plays, and now it stood as a symbol of something stronger than rules. Resolve. A few days later, Liam was officially invited to join the Transitional Board Committee. He accepted on one condition, that no future president would have unchecked power. Every rule, every policy, every enforcement mechanism would be publicly posted and subject to community vote transparency.
Wouldn't be a promise. It would be built into the